والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله أما بعد اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما إلى علمنا اللهم آمين. Tonight in our series of the Seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we're going to cover an incident that happened that defined the year of the birth of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As is popularly known that he was born Amul Fil, the year of the elephant. And so why is it called that way, and what is so special about that year that it should be so, and that we don't simply refer to that as being the year of the birth of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is actually a very, very famous incident, and there's a lot of history to it and a story behind it, and we'll try to cover that in probably a level of detail that might not have been heard by many people before. And this was, as Ibn Kathir rahimahullah ta'ala says, was a means of giving a sign, an ayah, and preparing the way for the coming of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because he was born during that same year according to the most popular opinion. The most popular opinion. So I want to just focus on that for a moment, because anyone in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we have to recognize that they did not have records of people's births and such, or deaths in Mecca during that time, nor in Hijaz or Oman. And so it wasn't until Islam actually became big near the end of the life of the Prophet ﷺ that records were being kept of all those things. However, of course, we know that even it wasn't until a few years after, during the Khilafah of Umar ibn Khattab, that they actually adopted a year system. And anything that happened before that time in the middle of the Khilafah of Umar ibn Khattab, there are differences of opinion within a year or so a lot of times, but certain incidents or certain individuals, then when it comes to their age, when it comes to when they were born, there might be a wide range of differences of opinion, and which is something that we might take for granted and just assume, for example, that Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu and Umar radiallahu anhu and Ibn Ali ibn Abdul-Muttalib radiallahu anhu, that those three, that they were all the same age as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when they all passed away, each and every one of them 63 years old. This is the popular opinion. However, for each of those individuals named, there are several opinions about how old they actually were and when they were actually born. And one thing that I find always fascinating is that during the hijrah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when Abu Bakr and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when they came to Yathrib, when they came to Medina, the people of Medina, or one of the narrators describes and says, Abu Bakr shaykhun ma'ruf, wa hadha shab ma'ahu. Abu Bakr was a well-known shaykh, but it was a young man with him. Who was the young man? The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But according to the popular opinion, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was older than Abu Bakr. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. We know that because of the barakah of the Risala, on one hand, the weight of the Risala, as I recited in Salatul Isha, سَنُلْقِي عَلَيْكَ قَوْلًا ثَقِيلًا, that's stressful upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But yet, at the same time, because of the blessings of that, it might also be that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made him look younger than he was. But Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. But it is most popular opinion that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was born the year of the elephant, which is approximately 571 or 572 CE. And again, this is approximate or circa, because the Prophet ﷺ, according to most, was 63 years old. However, 63 are these solar years that we go back from 623 or 633 back to 570. No, these are lunar years. So when comparing that to solar years, we go back from 633 to 571 or 572. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. So, going back to the incident of the elephant and what led to this, there's backstory to this. We know that Abraha al-Ashram, as he is known, the one who led the Yemeni army in this incident, he was actually Ethiopian. He wasn't Yemeni. So how did he get there? So we go back to Surah number 86 of the Quran, Surah al-Buruj, and Allah Azza wa Jal tells us, in brief, or doesn't really tell us the story behind it, but Allah memorializes, you could say, or talks about the dastardly deed of Ashab al-Ukhdud, the people who dug these ditches, dug these trenches, which would become mass graves, and pushed a bunch of believers in there and made a fire and just watched them all die, subhanAllah, in spite of their faith, or because of their faith. So this incident is actually a historical incident. It happened in either 518 CE or 523 CE, difference of opinion among historians. And the background of this was that the pagan king of Himyar, he had become Jewish, and particularly he embraced Kabbalic Judaism, which believes in magic. And so he had a magician in his court. And he also wanted to compel the people and call the people to his religion. And the magician in his court was growing old, and he wanted to teach his knowledge to a young boy from the town. And the young boy who was going and learning from the magician, he met a monk on the way to the palace of the king and the magician's court, and he was impressed by that monk, and he started learning from the monk. And the monk was teaching him Christianity. And so he's learning two different religions. And then to make a long story short, one time while on that path, he saw a lion or a ferocious animal, and then he said, well, now this is and people were blocked from continuing where they wanted to go. Everyone was afraid of the animal. And so he said, well, this is the time that I'm going to actually put to the test and see which religion is right. The religion of magic, of this sorcerer that I've been learning from, or the religion of this monk. And so at that point he took a rock, and presumably you might think that he might have taken two rocks, but then he prayed and he said, if the religion of the monk is true, then Allah, let this rock destroy this beast. And so after he threw the rock, it managed to hit the animal just right in the right spot, and ultimately caused its death. And so the people rejoiced. And when the monk saw that, he recognized the greatness of the faith of the boy, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had blessed him with this great karama, this blessing and gift, this miracle. And so people started coming to the boy asking for healing and for different things, and every time he would say, it is not me who heals, but it is Allah, the Lord of the worlds, who heals. And eventually a man from the magician's court asked for healing, and when he was healed by Allah for his, I think it was blindness if I recall correctly, then the king learned about this and ultimately tracked down who was responsible for this, and then tortured the monk to death, and then wanted the boy killed. And so he sent his guards to throw the boy off of the top of a mountain. He sent his guards to throw the boy going far out into the sea, and just dump him overboard. Every single time the boy would pray, Allahumma kfinihim bima shit. Oh Allah, suffice me from them however you will. And when he was in the mountains, the mountains started shaking, and everyone fell down the mountain and died, and the boy would come back to the palace unscathed, untouched, unhurt. And then when they were out to sea, the waves became crashing and rising up, and so The other men fell out of the boat, and then the boy ultimately came back unscathed once again. And so then the boy said to the king, that you will not be able to kill me unless, and this is the real karama, to be able to say this, that you will not be able to kill me unless you gather everyone together on a day of festival, and then you take an arrow out from my quiver, and then you say Bismillah, and then shoot it that way. And so the king did exactly as the boy said, and when it struck him, he then raised his hand up to his temple, and then that was when he passed away, rahimahullah ta'ala. And then the rest of the people, their faith in Christianity, the new religion, and without this, without the paganism of the sorcerer, this became dominant, and the people became more affirmed upon their faith. And so the king realized that this was going to impact his ability to spread the Kabbalic Judaism amongst the people of Himyar here. And so he then ordered, he felt greatly humiliated by this boy and the monk. So he dug these ditches, and then his army, they put the townspeople in these ditches, and then lit them on fire and killed them all. And this is what Surah Al-Buruj is about. And so there was one person that escaped. While all these Christians were killed, all these believers of the time, they were killed, there was one man named Abdul-Muttalib who escaped. And where did he go? He went north and met the Caesar Justin I, not to be confused with Justinian, one of the most famous emperors of Roman history, who will be mentioned later on. But Justin I, I think, was the uncle of Justinian. But so Justin I, this Caesar, he wrote to An-Najashi, because when this news spread of this great massacre, a lot of Christendom, the Christian world at that time, they felt great sympathy and thought, well, this cannot go unpunished. This, we can't, we have to take some action. We have to take some revenge. And so the Aksumite kingdom of Eritrea and Ethiopia, led by An-Najashi, the Caesar wrote to him, and so An-Najashi, he sent 2 generals along with a large army to destroy the last king of Himyar. And so those 2 generals were Aryet and Abraha. And so they destroyed this kingdom, and Dhun-Nawas, the king that had perpetrated this act, he ultimately, according to some sources here, he drowned in the sea trying to flee from Yemen. And at this point, the Ethiopians, the Christian Ethiopians, they were then free to rule Yemen, with Aryet and Abraha assuming dual governorship. Now, 2 individuals ruling something together, that didn't last long. They got into lots of fights, lots of disputes, and then finally one of them said, there's no need for us to fight each other with our armies. Let's just have a duel and fight to the death, and whoever survives is the ruler or the governor of Yemen. So they did that and accepted the challenge. And so in that fight, what they did was they made it so that they found a spot between 2 rivers so that no one had any place to go, back and forth. They were stuck there until the bitter end. And in this fight, Aryet was getting the upper hand. And at one point, with his sword, he slashed Abraha on the face and cut his nose and lips very severely. But then one of Abraha's bodyguards jumped in and killed Aryet. And so Abraha, who then became known as Al-Ashram, meaning the split face, or like Two-Face, not the Batman villain, but the Islamic villain, I guess you could say. So he then became the sole ruler of Yemen. Now, when this news reached An-Najashi, he was very upset by it. And, that he sent 2 generals, they can't get along, and then one of them kills the other. So he was very upset by that. And especially, killing him with this treacherous way. Now, when the Najashi heard about this, he said, he swore that it's upon me. He made a vow. I'm going to go to Yemen. I'm going to tread its soil, and I'm going to cut off your forelock, some hair from the top of his head, just just to kind of humiliate him. And then Abraha, what he did, and you can see from his response that he's kind of a politician as well. He sent a box of dirt from Yemen, and he cut his own forelock off himself and sent it in the box back to Najashi in the capital of Aksum, and said, you can fulfill your vow this way. This is dirt from soil from Yemen, and this is my forelock, and you just step on the soil and consider your vow fulfilled. And Najashi really liked that, and just acknowledged Abraha where he was in Yemen. Now Abraha, as the sole governor of Yemen, he had a new challenge to do at this point. So he wanted to spread Christianity. It's a proselytizing missionary religion, as we all know. So he needed to spread Christianity. He had a challenge here. There were lots of Jews in Yemen, and also lots of pagans in the rest of Arabia. So, and one thing that he saw that was an opportunity for him was the Hajj Pilgrimage in Mecca. So he thought, well, maybe I can turn people away from that temple over there in Mecca that Arabs are making pilgrimage to and also conducting trade with, and I can turn them over to here in Yemen to Sana'a. So that's when he decided that they have a temple, I'm going to build an even better temple and a great cathedral. So he sent letters to both the Najashi and also the emperor, the Caesar of Rome. And there's even, and now here, by this time, Justinian was the emperor of Rome, Justinian I, the very, very famous emperor. And there are actually letters in their archives that mention the envoy and messaging back and forth between Justinian and Abraha, and dispatching an envoy to Abraha with some materials. And so a little bit about the church itself, the cathedral that he constructed. There's some descriptions of it that it was green, yellow, white, and black stone. Part of the foundation was actually brought from an older castle from Yathrib. It had a marble staircase, a door made of bronze or copper. There were floral motifs, flower designs, a gold star for the portico, a polychrome mosaic crosses, silver and gold for the dome. And then there were also carved woods and ivory combined with gold panel inserts and precious stones and crosses. So you can imagine this was what he wanted. He wanted to make this, if it was going to persuade people to make pilgrimage there instead, it had to be absolutely gorgeous. It had to be, one of the best cathedrals of the world at the time, and that's what he wanted, and that's what his objective was. And he called it Koleis, which comes from the Greek Ekklesia, as some say, but also others say it was called Koleis because of its great height. And so that if someone looked at it, if they were right next to it trying to look above, then their hat would fall back from behind. And then at this point, then Abraham, he sends word out to the Arab people, here's a new temple. It's much better than that square box that you have over there in Mecca. So how about you come here and perform your pilgrimage here? You can do everything you want, and then we'll teach you a more civilized religion than the idol worship that you have over there. And one of the ways that he wanted to do this was actually, and this was kind of maybe a mistake on his part, or this was one of his blunders. Now, at first, of course, his intention and thinking that he could quickly persuade people without recognizing the significance of the Kaaba, that was, of course, his first blunder. But here, the next move that he makes was that there were some Arabs in his area, and some of them had come to Sana'a and met him because they were seeking a bounty. And he invited them for a feast, a festival that he was having, and he decided to crown one of them and make him the Emir of Mudar. And Mudar, as we learned, were the Arabs to the west, the Hijaz and all that area, while their Qasim, or the other Arabs of Adnan, were known as Rabi'a. And so he just finds some random Arab guy and says, "You are the Emir of Mudar. Here's my kitab. Here's maybe here's a cloak and whatever it is, so that you are distinguished now. And I'm sending you to go spread the message for the rest of the Arabs to make pilgrimage here." And this just reminds me of some of those times that we read about in the last decade or so. Every so often we read about, the United States entering into talks with Taliban. And then a week later we'd say that the United States was entering the talks with people that that were representing Taliban, but they actually had no position within Taliban whatsoever. Just some random people that they thought were important people, but actually were not. And so just like that, Abraham, he had found some random Arabs, decided to give them a great title, and then send them back as, like, you're the king of the Arabs for now. And that sort of thing. Are the rest of them going to accept that? No. And that's exactly what happened. A man from Hudayl actually killed this messenger, and so then his brother ran back to Sana'a, and this made Abraha extremely upset, and he promised to raid the Kinana tribe and destroy their idol temple. And also at this time, because this news had spread, then the Quraysh, they were infuriated and insulted by this as well. And so a member of Quraysh, what did he do? And he went to Sana'a, and then in the middle of the night, he relieved himself and defecated inside of this church, inside of this cathedral. And when the custodians found that out, they let Abraham know. They said, one of Quraysh has done this in anger over their house, righteous anger, in whose place that you have placed this church. And they're kind of giving him a hint here, but that only made him more upset. And Muqatil ibn Sulaiman, a historian, he says that a group of young men from Quraysh also entered the church, and they started a fire on a windy day. And so, what happened then? And so the church caught fire and collapsed to the ground. And so Abraham, he decided, this is it. I need to break these people's pride, and I need to take revenge. And also, if I have any chance of turning them to make Hajj to this place and boost our economic power, and also to spread Christianity, the way that I have to do it, I must destroy the Kaaba. So that's what he was thinking. And so then he sent more letters to Najashi, and then the Najashi sent to him a great elephant. And some sources mention 8 or even a dozen elephants, but one thing that we know for certain was one big elephant, which actually had a name of Mahmud. That's what it was called. And I don't know why this always makes me laugh whenever I learn this detail. But that's how the elephant was called, Mahmud. And most likely this was a North African elephant. And this is a species of elephants that are now extinct. But these elephants were known as war elephants. They were used a lot of times by the Carthaginians from Tunisia and other lands of North Africa and Sudan, for war beforehand. And so here Abraha, he amasses this army with Mahmud and a bunch of other elephants. And so subhanAllah, some of the Arab, they heard about this expedition, they became fearful, and out of their own protective jealousy, their own adira for the Kaaba, they decided they're going to fight Abraha and make sure that he doesn't even get a chance to leave Yemen or even Sana'a. But yet, nonetheless, Abraha defeated them, and as Ibn Kathir says, this is due to Allah's will and his attempt to honor and venerate the Kaaba. And so, the army of Abraha continued on its way north. It reached Khat'am, and he was, if villages did not respect him, he would, massacre them and raid them. And at one point, a man named Nufail ibn Habib was taken prisoner, and then they turned him into a guide for them. And then when he reached Ta'if, the people of Ta'if were afraid that he was going to destroy their idol, Al-Lat, who is mentioned in the Quran. And they actually went out and greeted Abraha and ennobled him and treated him with a lot of respect. And even one of their men went with him as a guide as well. And then he reached a place called Al-Mulammas, which is near Mecca. And from here, he sent a lot of his troops out just to kind of, pillage a little bit and strike fear into the hearts of people, and also to steal some of the grazing animals of the Meccans at Mulammas, which included 200 camels that belonged to a man named Abdul-Muttalib, who we learned a little bit about last time, who had dug up the well of Zamzam in our dars last week. Now, this the leader of and guide for this last part of the journey, there are some hikam and amthal, and satirical words about him in Arab literature, more deceitful than Al-Aswad ibn Mafsud, for example, that a saying that might be mentioned in ancient Arab literature, referring to some of these Arabs that had turned their back on the Kaaba and helped out the army of Abraha al-Ashram. And so then he sent, on the outskirts of Mecca, he sent another emissary into Mecca to meet the Quraysh and bring the leader of Quraysh to him, and also to inform them that they would not fight any of the people of Mecca unless they tried to prevent the destruction of the Kaaba. So, seems fair. He's just coming after the building alone and nothing else. And so that emissary was directed to Abdul-Muttalib, who said that by Allah, we have no wish to fight him, nor are we in any position to do so. This is the sacred house of Allah, the house of his Khalil Ibrahim, and if he wishes to prevent him from destroying it, it is his house and his sacred place to do so. And if he lets him approach it, then by Allah, then we have no means to defend it from him. So the emissary brought him to Abraha, and when Abraha first met Abdul-Muttalib, he was very impressed by him, his stature. He was apparently a large man who was also very, very handsome. And so Abraha actually, as described by the narrators here, he got down from his chair to sit with him on the carpet on the ground. And then the translator asked, "What do you need?" And Abdul-Muttalib said to the translator, "I want the king to return my camels, which he has taken from me, which are 200 in number." And Abraha was shocked by this, and he told his translator to tell him, "I was impressed by you when I first saw you, but now I withdraw from you after you have spoken to me. You are asking me about 200 camels which I have taken from you, and you leave the matter of a house which is the foundation of religion, and the religion of your fathers, which I have come to destroy, and you don't say to me anything about it." So, and what he said there makes sense. And, one thing about this point, Abraha, he either wanted to feel powerful by seeing these leaders cower in fear to him while he demonstrates his own power, or he may have been willing to return without bloodshed if he could by sheer fear and persuade the Quraysh themselves to surrender the Kaaba and settle for some money in its place to turn the rest of the Arabs away from Mecca and tell them, "Go make Hajj to Yemen instead, we're done here." but the survivability of Mecca itself as a city, as a town, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes in the Quran, ala lisani Ibrahim, wadin ghayri dhi zar. It's a valley without any agriculture. It just has the well of Zamzam. Now it just has that. But otherwise, if it weren't for the Kaaba, it would disappear like any other of the economic markets of Jahiliyyah, like Suq al-Uqad, the legendary Uqad market of Jahiliyyah, which was still alive right during the time of the Bi'tha, but since then has, faded into extinction. Now, Abdul-Muttalib, his response to this, he said, I am the Lord of the camels, Rabbul Ibil. But as for the house, the Kaaba, it has its Lord who will defend it. And Abraha said, then I can't be destroyed, I can't be prevented from destroying it. And so Abdul-Muttalib said, then do so, do as you wish. And it's said that also some historians mention that a number of Arab chiefs, they accompanied Abdul-Muttalib, and they themselves were also perplexed by his response, and they offered a third of the wealth of the tribe of Tihama if Abraha would return back home. But he refused, and he did return Abdul-Muttalib's camels to him. So saying that if that's all you want, then all right, take it. We came for a much greater purpose. So that was Abraha's thought. So then Abdul-Muttalib, he goes back and he ordered the rest of the people of Quraysh to leave Mecca, to leave al-Masjid al-Haram and seek shelter at the top of the mountains, afraid of any excesses that might be committed by the army against them. And then he took hold of the metal ring at the door of the Kaaba, along with a number of other leaders of Quraysh. And at this point he called upon Allah for victory over Abraha and his army. He didn't call upon Hubal, the idol that was inside the Kaaba. He didn't call upon Uzza or any of the others. And Abdul-Muttalib said, well, hang on to the ring of the Kaaba door. There is no matter more important to any man right now other than the defense of his livestock and property. So, O my Lord, defend your property. Their cross and their cunning will not be victorious over your cunning by the time morning comes. And so Abdul-Muttalib let go of the ring, and they left Mecca and ascended on the mountain top, Safa and Marwa and beyond. And Muqatil, the historian, says that they left 100 animals tied near the Kaaba, hoping that some of the army would then take some of them without right to do so, and thus bring the vengeance of Allah upon themselves for the itham of dhulm and theft. But ultimately what happened the next morning, Abraha prepared to enter Mecca, and he prepared Mahmud, the great elephant, and he mobilized his army, and with Mahmud in the lead, and with their chains that they were going to wrap around the Kaaba and hope that the elephants would knock the Kaaba down and completely demolish it. Mahmud is not moving. The chief of the army here, the big giant elephant that's as big as this room, or is as tall as this room, or even taller, is not moving. So you can imagine, even if 100 people gather around and push, he's not moving, he's not budging. And Nufail ibn Habib, he says, kneel Mahmud, and turn around and return directly from where you came, for verily this is the sacred house of Allah. And then he released Mahmud's ear, it knelt, and so Mahmud is even further entrenched in its place. And then Nufail, he left and ditched the Axumites and went into the mountains with the rest of Quraysh. And so then Abraha's men, they're beating the elephant, they're trying to make it rise, they're even beating it on its head with staffs and axes and hooked staffs to try to pull it up. And then so they tested, they bring him, they pull him southward towards Yemen, and he gets up and walks quickly. Then they pull him northward towards Bilad al-Sham, and he gets up and moves quickly. They turn him eastward, and he gets up and he's moving quickly. But then when they turn him to the west towards Mecca, then he kneels down again. And at this point, this is when Allah Azza wa Jal sent birds from the sea like swallows and herons, each bird carrying 3 stones the size of chickpeas and lentils, 1 in each claw and 1 in his beak. Everyone who was hit by them was destroyed, and then they fled in panic along the road, asking about the whereabouts of Nufail, their guide, and however he was at the top of the mountains with Quraysh, and the other Arab who were observing the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that was descending upon the people of the elephant. And Nufail then recited some poetry, which I'm not even going to begin with that. But Ata ibn Yasar and others who were witness, they said, other historians, they said that some of them were destroyed immediately, while others were gradually broken down, limb by limb, while trying to escape, including Abraha among them, until he died. According to one report, he died when he reached Khat'am, which was a place that he had raised. And according to another report, he did not die until he reached Sana'a, and finally his heart just fell out of his chest, subhanAllah. And Ibn Ishaq, the most famous author of Seerah, he said that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam with the prophethood, among the things that he used to recount to the people of Quraysh as the blessings that Allah had favored them with of his bounties was Allah defending them from the attack of the Abyssinians, from the Christians on this day. And due to this alone, meaning the Quraysh, were allowed to remain safely in Mecca for a period of time. As for Qudais, as mentioned in some versions, they say that some of the Quraysh had, set fire to it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. There are also narrations that say that it survived until the reign of Al-Mansur al-Abbasi, a famous Khalifa of the Abbasids, basically around, later 700s, around 770-ish, at which point it was looted again and nothing, was never rebuilt after that. And actually, even till today, you can look up Qudais, Sana'a, and you can see pictures of it, what's remaining of it. Warqatul Qudais, see pictures now, and it even has its own, place in the Ministry of Tourism, and you can actually see what's left of the foundation, a circular foundation in Sana'a, the capital of Yemen. And that's another thing regarding the historicity of this incident. We know from the Book of Allah, Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, we believe everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us. Everything, we believe it all. It is all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when talking about certain incidents like this, subhanAllah, it might make people scratch their heads and wonder how could really birds carry rocks the size of chickpeas and then destroy an entire army, subhanAllah. But yet there is a lot of eyewitness accounts that were recorded in the Shi'r of the Arab, and as is said, Shi'r Diwan al-Arab, that the poetry of Jahiliyyah is the records of the Arab peoples. And there's many mention of this incident and descriptions of the birds and the rocks that were dropped, destroying the army of Abraha and himself. So subhanAllah, the historicity, and even there were cave paintings, or inscriptions and carvings, rock carvings and wall carvings, where people that had observed that famous army that went forward, probably one of the only times in history up to this point that a large army with war elephants was going and crossing parts of Arabia, that this was such a huge event that people actually drew pictures of it and inscriptions along the way. And I remember when I lived in Medina, reading some articles about historians and archaeologists tracing the route that Abraha took based upon different inscriptions that were made of people that witnessed it, and they were in awe of it, and they drew pictures of the elephants and the birds as well. So, and there's also, lots of different records from, even from their own sources of the Himyarite kingdom of that expedition, but because they were the losers, they conveniently leave out why they turned back, why it was unsuccessful, just that they went north with some elephants to destroy the Kaaba, end of story. And so, subhanAllah, it's, just goes to show, subhanAllah, the historicity of the Quran and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us of the stories from Surah Al-Buruj and also from Surah Al-Fil, Surah 104, I believe it is, from the Quran. So both of these surahs, they have their place and mention in history, 518 and 523-ish for Surah Al-Buruj, and around 571 for Surah Al-Fil and the incidents that took place there. So inshallah ta'ala, with next week, we will talk about the birth of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and also his father Abdullah ibn Abdul-Muttalib a little bit more, inshallah ta'ala. Subhanakallahumma bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us and increase us in knowledge and understanding and appreciation of the Seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to increase us in our faith and in following the footsteps of the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam. جزاك الله خير.